Good evening, everyone, and good morning if you're joining us from other time zones. Good afternoon as well. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first of many more persistent alumni events to come, we hope. This is part of our effort and endeavor, to reach out to the thousands of persistent alumni that are out there. We realize close to 19,000 plus alumni as just something that we have in our database apparently at this point. So with such a strong and vibrant community of alumni, we thought this is a good time as any to create an outreach program. So you all would have also received a newsletter from Persistent. And thank you for those who have signed up today. This session and the sessions like this are intended towards connecting with some of our distinguished and illustrious alumni and learning from their experience both with and beyond Persistent and before Persistent. So as part of that, today I have two people whom I have known for a long time, and they are very distinguished and have had a very illustrious career with and beyond Persistent. So let me start by introducing them. But before that, let me tell a little bit about myself if you have, you have left before I joined. My name is Pandurang Kamath. Presently, I'm CTO at Persistent, and I look after innovation and R&D for Persistent globally. I joined about 9 years ago in 2012, and it's been a fantastic journey with Persistent since then. With me, I have Lavina Laitonjam. She is the founder of Rent and Attire, a new business venture she started a few years ago after leaving Persistent. She's an HR professional turned entrepreneur. She has over 18 years of experience in managing and leading various aspects of human resources and operations. Having led multiple teams in talent acquisition and L&D in her corporate career, she switched gears to run her own company, Rent and Attire, which is disrupting the current market through a unique concept. She's also spreading awareness about sustainable living. She founded Rent and Attire in 2015, and it has already been recognized as an innovative fashion rental startup and top 10 best online rental startups. And she's also state president of Startup Council for Maharashtra. She advises a lot of women entrepreneurs in her spare time. And one interesting detail is that while doing all of this, she has also been a gold medalist in shooting at the state level and continues to pursue it as a hobby. So Lavina, a very, very warm welcome to you on this first event, alumni event, and thank you for joining us today. The other guest that I have with me is Jayant Walvekar. He has close to 3 decades of experience in product engineering, architecture, design, and building highly motivated product teams, driven by passion, innovation, and ownership. Jayant was with Persistent for 20 years and played very key role in building the organization's product culture and next level leadership. He led the cloud business delivery and also helped startups deliver products in public, private cloud, virtualization, IT management, and endpoint management, analytics, security, and RDBMS. He holds a bachelor's in engineering degree in computer engineering from Shivaji University, India. And there is no one distinctive thing, but there are many distinctive things about Jayant. He's a watercolor artist. He's a chef. He's a science student. A gadget geek, Mr. Fix-It. He loves coding. In his spare times, he takes sessions on Einstein's theory of relativity, and he believes these hobbies have added immense value to his professional career, and we'd love to hear more about how that is. These are the habits that have taught him many aspects that make him good at his job, which is which require abstract thinking, patience, creativity, dealing with ambiguity, and so forth. Currently, he is the co-founder and CTO of his own startup that is building products in the networking space. So with that introduction, Jayant, a very warm welcome to you. And again, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Pandurang. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. So let me begin. Today's conversation, I've known Lavina and Jayant for a while, but I've spoken to them in advance. What can the community get out of this? So in today's conversation, we will talk about how to have very rich professional journeys. We'll talk about growth and leadership and resilience and life beyond work, right? Finding purpose and doing things outside your professional work that can actually enhance your professional journey. This is supposed to be an interactive and lightweight and conversational session. So let's keep it that way. I'm very excited to hear from our guests. So Lavina, let me start with you. Tell us a bit about your journey and being very action oriented in order to achieve the goals you set for yourself, and how do you go about doing it?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this platform, and I'm overjoyed, overwhelmed to be here. And I would be happy to share few of my experiences which can help fellow entrepreneurs, fellow colleagues who can, at least add those in their day-to-day life. So when I say action oriented, I strongly believe in power of action. And I would start with a quote, which is words may inspire, but only action creates change. Right? So for me, action has been very, very important. Be it anything, we start with action like waking up in a day, getting ready, getting out. All those are actions. If we don't take those actions, we are not going to move forward. And in my life, action has played very, very important role. For an example, I wanted to be an army officer. I come from a army background. Forever thought of being in army, joining army, being an army officer. However, that did not work. And then I chose to get into HR, which was again by some action my friend recommended, and I went there. When I joined there, I had absolutely no idea how IT works, and absolutely no idea of know-how of IT. And only I knew that I don't know it. Nobody else knew that I'm not aware of this. So those 3 months are actually used to learn more about it, so that action actually helped me in knowing how it helps. Uh, and the biggest example which I can give, and I'm all thankful to Persistent about the same, that when I started, how did Rent and Attire happen? So it was a cafeteria discussion. We all know how beautiful cafeteria we have in Nullstop office, and we had thoroughly enjoyed being there and taking the cup of tea there. So it was an individual problem. It was a problem which I was discussing with my colleagues, that I have a wedding to attend in North. My entire family comes from North, and I had to buy a designer wear, and I was just not okay spending so much in a designer wear and not use it again. And that's where I started talking to my colleagues there that, if I buy a designer wear, and since I'm going to wear it only once, would you all maybe re-wear it so that I will feel good that there's value for money? And that's how the conversation started. And like always, we all talk about, weather issues, traffic issues at the cafeteria table. However, we don't pursue it further. So there's so many problem statements in front of us, and we can actually find a solution for the same. See, the topic which we discussed, we were 8 of us, we all went back to desk and forgot about it and started focusing more on the work defined to us. And I pursue that, and I decided to do a small survey within my network of friends and family and colleagues to understand what do people think about the same. When I did that survey, when I ran that survey, to my surprise, the response was 99% yes, everybody would be happy to rent outfits because it's economical, it's sustainable, and that's how Rent and Attire was born. So that action, if I wouldn't have taken, I wouldn't have been where I am today. So that is why I say action is very, very important. And very interestingly, when I was today researching on the topic also, uh, I got to know something very, very interesting, that there's a science of action. So action is actually a muscle which stays in with us. So an example, if you go and learn any instrument, be it guitar or piano, initially we struggle to play it, and gradually we become very, very fast in it. So it is actually the muscle memory which remembers that. So that that is the action which has been taken. So that is something which I really, really liked. And another interesting thing which I learned today was instead of brainstorming, why don't we action storm things? So calling it action storming instead of brainstorming, so that we actually reach to the result. That's how I feel being action oriented has always helped me right from the start of my career to where I am today. And I'm just getting started.
Excellent. And action storming instead of brainstorming. That sums it up beautifully. Jayant, I want to turn to you. You have this very unique perspective about developing and cultivating a product mindset to accelerating your individual growth, right? And obviously, having been a phenomenal product person yourself, so that's clearly something that comes from experience and expertise. So tell us a bit about the product mindset to achieve individual growth, which is something you have done yourself personally.
Yeah, sure. Hey, so again, thanks for inviting me on this talk. I hope we all make it interesting. So we'll share my experiences, and then maybe you can probe as a third party or third person if you want to know a little bit more interesting stuff. Okay, because this is my more of my experience and my the journey that I have gone through. What people may like could be different stuff. So you definitely probe me around it. So before I really get into product mindset, I'll give you a very quick brief about me so basically when I was young, actually I used to like paintings a lot. Okay, and in my childhood I used to do paintings, and as usual with any Indian kid those days, the only career options available that time was medical and engineering. And somehow I got into medical, but I was actually forced into medical. And even before I finalized my admissions, I actually went to the college and just took back my admission without even informing my father. I just canceled my admission and went to engineering because I thought it's better to be engineer than doctor, even though I'm probably an artist. Okay.
Thank
So
God for
what
that.
happened was really when I start and I towards the towards end of my 12th standard, I was lucky to have a relative of mine who had a computer, and I started playing with it and I started enjoying it, and that's where I decided to become a computer engineer. Although that time computer was least popular branch in academics, it was below civil and I could get in anyway. So what happened actually, when I look back after I graduated, was that my artistic background somehow made me look at code as an art. Okay, there's a huge debate whether it is an art or science or whatever. But to me, it really looked like an art. And I just went on building onto it, and not just coding, but then eventually I figured out and I started liking building products, because that also I looked like it looked to me like an art, right? Somebody wants something and it's abstract when you really ask somebody, what do you want? And then from there you have to make something concrete. And that's something that I look at it like an art. And that's how, when I say product mindset, it really starts there. When you want to build a product, it's like painting to me. When you want to when you want to paint, when you look at the scene, you actually don't see the whole painting. You see colors, you see tones, you see patterns, you see triangles, rectangles, circles, and it's very abstract. And then finally, something comes out of it. It has to be presentable, pleasing. It has to have purpose. And this whole my brain wiring happened around it, okay, as an artist, which actually started helping me in building product mindset, honestly. So this is how I look at it, as a product mindset. So when I say product mindset, you build something out of abstract which is usable, right? And so we especially in services industries, we have been groomed to look at the requirement, expect very detailed requirement, and build something out of it. And product really starts much earlier than that, and that's where we miss the bus. So right from a very abstract concept till finding out what users want, to how do we carve that out into some features, and then how do we detail out requirement and writing requirements. These are the much important and earlier things that happen even before we get the requirement and start coding. And that that mindset has to come in, as in, how do you think beyond requirement? How do you think what user wants, right? And so basically, what I learned in my career, I mean, probably it's not new, but when you learn through self experience, you admire it a lot. So to build a product, first thing is like you need to decide what to build, okay? Then when to build and how to build. Really, how to build is easiest part of all these things. How to build is nothing when we all whole bunch of competent architects and developers and testers sit in a room. We know how to build it, but what to build is the most difficult thing that can happen in product. Because what to build and when to build, and it has to be sellable. That's where the product journey starts. And if you're not hooked into that journey, what to build and when to build, then you won't be able to appreciate how to build it, because how to build, again I said, like, it's really least important, honestly, part of it. So that's where it made me focus on those two aspects: what to build and when to build.
Very Steve Jobsian take on product, right? As product as an art, and then deciding what and when being more important than how you go about building it. I think that's a fascinating insight. I want to turn on a slightly different theme with both of you, on innovation and creativity and opportunities and things like that. So I want to ask Lavina first. You have talked to me about your own approach towards innovation and spotting new opportunities, and you described one such opportunity that triggered the journey for Rent and Attire, right? But tell us more about the process or the frameworks that you follow in spotting and capitalizing on innovative opportunities in life, in business, or in career.
Sure. So I have been an opportunist, let me put it that way. Like I said, when I was young, I always wanted to join army, prepared for it. That's how I learned shooting. I was part of NCC, things which any young girl would not do. I was doing all that to get into it. However, missed the bus. And that's where I realized, where am I and what am I going to do now? Because I only prepared myself for army, and totally lost at that juncture. I realized that let's just get started. That's where the action triggered me to get started with HR. Uh, However, when it comes to being innovative and opportunist, I took a lot of opportunity when I started my career in HR. Then I moved within Persistent. I did move to multiple departments. I started my career with recruitment, hiring, and in 2008, when the recession hit us, uh, we were, confused what to do, and that is where our team decided to go and help other team and see what best we can do, and how do we utilize the time. And I'm very thankful to the organization for that we were engaged in a very productive way. So I went and started helping L&D, learning and development team, and while doing so, I realized that I see a lot of growth opportunity for me as an individual there. Things can be done differently. So that's where I took the shift post that recession and moved to L&D and worked on my personal growth, my personal development. At the same time, how can I make the team better? So we've complemented the entire thing, and it worked very well for me. I did very good in my overall career path there. And also in my current business, if we talk about opportunity, we all have seen how COVID had hit us very badly and the business was impacted. But what we realized was, when we hit the ground, we realized that it was an opportunity in crisis for us, considering the business in mind, that people became more aware about the sustainable living. People want to save more for the mother earth. We all know that textile industry produces maximum waste in the landfills. People became more aware about that, and at the same time, a lot of us lost jobs and wanted to go economical. And so immediately we changed the pitch of, we change the marketing strategies. How do we reach out to people so that we now, showcase the business differently? And that was another opportunity which, in a business helped us to do better than, pre-COVID era. So that's how, I've taken advantage of opportunities all the time.
That's fascinating, and I'm going to come back to that, after I go to Jayant, on the COVID impact and the resilience that you and your team had to show, right? So let's come back to that in a second. I want to go back to Jayant. Jayant, so as we are talking about creativity and innovation and so forth, one point I wanted to explore with you is you have a extensive range of hobbies, right? I have not seen so many different interests in one person. It's like Sharma ji ka beta, right? So you're doing everything and you're good at it too. It's not that you're doing them just as passing. So the question is what role do you think these hobbies have played in fueling the creativity and passion that you have shown in your professional life and helped you in accomplishing good things? And how do you cultivate these, almost as a discipline to kind of be better at everything that you do? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so first of all, basically, I'll tell you why we need to have hobbies. Whatever that hobby is, even if somebody calls book reading as a hobby, that's fine. But if the hobby is more action oriented, more exploratory, that's even better. So what happens is, and everybody, maybe for some people, I mean, even for me, coding itself is hobby. So I do coding as well. I do learn new technologies. So the idea that I always have in mind with hobbies is that what happens in once you are in a corporate career and you have corporate deadlines, then your thinking is always towards that deadline, and sometimes you miss the bigger picture. Okay, and what happens is it's not about stepping back, seeing the big picture or not seeing the big picture. Actually, I feel that we just our brain just starts losing the ability of stepping back and seeing the big picture. So what happens with hobbies is, first of all, there is no deadline that you are working towards. You can have your own goals. That is first thing. Second thing is that itself makes you step back and look at the bigger picture in your hobbies and what you want to do. You can set your goals, you can fail, whatever, fine. The implication of that is not much. So maybe you can take more risks in your hobbies. But the most important thing that I find is that it actually trains you to step back and think differently. So for example, I'll give you examples of my hobbies and how they help me in thinking product, right? So I just said sometime back, like painting, okay? When I look at painting, you are looking at some landscape and you want to paint it, right? It's too much happening there. It's too much, too many requirements, too many things coming your way. And you have to really filter out what is important. Okay, you have to really find out what is that 20% that is important and what is that 80% that you can still ignore and still come out with a good painting. So first thing is how to prioritize and how to subtract noise and how to pick important things. That's one. Second thing is when you actually start painting and when you pick pencil and draw something on paper, everybody knows you draw triangles and rectangles and circles, nothing else, because that's what it is. So your ability to think abstract, okay, from that complex piece of landscape, right, and actually focus on, one thing at a time and uh, take out the other things and just look at the fundamental shapes, fundamental colors, put them and start, kind of merging them to come out with a painting makes me really think of patterns everywhere. And it is nothing but straight 1:1 mapping to design patterns when I start doing architecture, when I look at features, when I look at product architecture, product vision. Just like landscape, I start seeing small patterns and I start extracting patterns, and that becomes my patterns in my design. Okay. So that makes me really focus on the architecture or those patterns. And ultimately the painting has to come together and it has to look appealing, right? So it has to look decent. I mean, not every time, but yeah, that's the goal. So in the product terminology, it has to be a usable product. Somebody has to be able to use it, right? So you have to start thinking from that point of view that it has to be usable. So that's how I kind of correlate. Another example is when I go for cooking, right? So cooking is slightly different. What happens in cooking is you have all the raw ingredients, okay, and you know the final dish, and you have to produce that dish in as less time as possible. So my brain immediately starts thinking parallel processing, slice the activities, align them in such a way that once this thing is ready, that thing is ready. It's as good as simple as you keep water for boiling, it takes more time. You cut vegetables, it takes time. This vegetable takes less time to cook and whatnot. So your brain is like processing so many threads in parallel so that everything has to come together towards the end. So the entire parallel processing planning activity that really helps me in product thinking about product. In fact, so many times I have given this example, especially when I do product demo. I actually follow the demos I would do for, let's say, bread making or some other dish. And actually, I plan things in such a way that, you are cooking the bread. You can't like do the show for 2 hours. So you have something half baked, then middle way through, and the final product, and you show it as if, things are like cooked in 30 minutes. So your demo has to be arranged in such a way that you have multiple environments, so many things, and it has to seem seamless from one environment to another as if the whole demo is done, right? So these are the parallels I like. Okay, and all my gadgets hobbies, by the way, I repair lots of gadgets. I do all my fixing it at home myself. Those actually help me deal with ambiguity, because I don't know the subject, but I jump into it, take it home automation, take it microcontrollers. I have built my home automation kits and whatnot. So it's like you don't know that area at all, but you have to jump into it. So that's the ambiguous requirement. From there, you start from that concept and bring to some concrete idea and then implement and test it and go back. So that's also something wires my brain to think like that in the product. So these are the things, wire myself, in a in a way that it helps me in product development.
That's a really, really beautiful and elegant, mapping between hobbies and building things that I've heard. Thank you for sharing that. By the way, I think you gave me an idea. I would love to have you try, explaining architecture and design of software systems using those TikTok style recipe videos. I think that's a $10 million idea right there as a creator. I think you'll be good at it too. But that's fascinating, Jan. That's brilliant take. I want to switch back to Lavina, and ask a slightly different question before we go to the resilience part. You've had, as you described, right, a very interesting career path that took twists and turns, and you capitalized on different opportunities. So clearly, these were not things you learned in, let's say, college, right, during your education and so forth. You went from HR to L&D, and then now as an entrepreneur. So what are the things, skills, and abilities that made you or put you in the right position, to do these pivots and to build for a future that you did not anticipate when you were, say, studying in school or college? What are those skills that people need to develop to have and capitalize on the opportunities the way you've done?
Sure. Before I respond to that, thank you, Jen. That was very beautifully expressed, and I'm also going to inculcate few of it. All right. So talking about developing skills, I've had worked in various, environment, different skill set, and this was a very interesting journey. Like I said, when I started my career, was working totally towards, working towards joining army. So I had developed a different skill set. Then I moved to recruitment, where I was expected to be more aggressive towards the, the work which was defined. I was supposed to be more goal oriented and result oriented. However, when I moved to L&D, I realized that I need to calm down a little, because when you plan for such large audience, you really have to look at each thing individually and then come up with the entire plan. So while doing all this, and beautifully when I started Rent and Attire, I realized all that what I've learned needs to be unlearned now. And then I have to acquire a very different skill set. And I'll quote an example to you. And this is very funny example, which I generally like to talk about, because that is also going to tell people how changing industry and changing entire environment is going to change you as a person. So when we started Trent and Attire in year 2015, we had a team of 4 people who were taking care of the retail store, and I just went there once, and we had few orders. I mean, that time we used to have few orders, so I was very, very touchy and personal about those orders. So I said I will talk to the entire team, you know. So I went and spoke to the dry cleaner. I mean, team used to be, you know, that. So I went and spoke to the dry cleaner. Then I went and spoke to the alteration tailor, and I just told him, you know, ये कल सुबह 10 बजे मुझे यहाँ चाहिए, you know, very corporate style. We were used to of dropping an email, right? This shall be done by EOD today or EOD tomorrow. So he's used to of that. So when I told him that, I felt that there was a silence around me, but I didn't ask anything. And next day morning, this uh, guy doesn't answer the call. He did not show up. And then when I asked the team that, and the team was from fashion background, since that's the first skill set I would need. So when I asked them what happened, they said, "Ma'am, ऐसे नहीं बात करते हैं यहाँ पे. We cannot tell the tailor you have to be her." So you know, the way I changed, you know, the bigger skills are different. Here it was personally I had to change in a lot of things, from writing an email to, you know, this should be done by tomorrow EOD to भैया कल please time पे आ जाइए, is what I had to switch to. You know, so that's a major shift in your personality. So first thing first is change in personality was something which I had to work upon. So I did a lot of work on personality development. And I feel that that's a very, very important aspect in any individual, professional, personally, wherever we are. Also had to work a lot on the communication skills, because how we communicate now, communication skills is not only your verbal communication. It is when you're even not communicating, you're communicating something. So that communication skills, your verbal, your written, your overall presentation. So when I started, it's very interesting when I used to tell people that I've started a, you know, marketplace where we work on shared economy. And so then people would simply ask, so, you know, what do you do in that? So I said, I rent out designer outfits. Actually, you give outfits on rent at the end of the day, you know. So positioning from that to positioning here, where people now know us as a sustainable brand, where people now talk about how we are contributing to, you know, sustainable living, how we are actually working on circular economy. You know, nobody had ever thought that you can make money out of the hanged outfit which is in your closet, right? We are reusing, recycling those outfits. We are not really purchasing anything new. That is how we are helping the environment, helping the textile industry to produce less textile waste. So, you know, all this was a change of shift from what I've learned to, you know, what I had to relearn. I call it unlearning and relearning. So that is how the different skill set came into picture. And among all this, I felt that personality development was the bigger thing for me.
That's a excellent way to put it, and the way the anecdote that you described, right, is one of the ways entrepreneurs learn the hard way sometimes, is in the field, as to what they know and what they should unlearn and what they should have to, you know, pick up when they should pick up new things. That's fascinating. Jayant, on the same lines, you and I have talked about you know, your views on risk taking, right? And in order to make these kind of shifts in career that we've just talked with Lavina about, one of the elements one has to develop is sometimes go outside your comfort zone, outside of your skin and elements, and take some risks to bet on yourself. So tell us about a bit about how that actually comes about, and how does one develop that that ability and that fortitude to do that.
Yeah. So I think there could be many important ingredients for that, but two important ingredients are passion and the one Lavina said, action. Okay. So if you are doing something, either you're not happy about it or you want to do something else. So first thing is you really have to see whether you are trying to escape from what you're doing right now, or you really feel passion about something else that you want to do. Okay. And if you're trying to run away from something, I mean, maybe don't do it right away. Just find out something else that really that you have passion about, or even within the current job, if you want to change something slightly, just be sure why you are doing it. That is the first thing I felt is important. So I'll just give you my example in theory, So by 2010 in Persistent, first 10 years of journey was very, I would say stressful, but yet interesting because most of the customers I worked with were startups, and predominantly something like there is just CEO and CTO in the US and the whole team is in Persistent. So those were definitely and that actually those were the most product mindset building years at Persistent for me. Uh, Company was growing and we were needed to play different roles. So I went into management role, played management roles. But back of my mind, I knew that I love technology and I should go back to it sometime. Okay, so almost it took me 2 years from 2010 to 2012 to really make that decision. And for me, the decision was easy. Okay, but fortunately or unfortunately, whatever that is, my well-wishers were not supportive of my decision because they were thinking like, this is a suicidal move to go get out of management now in a growing company like this and get into technical track, right? So the most important thing was for me was passion. I just wanted to do something technical, and I loved it. And as I said earlier, coding was also one of my hobbies and art. So even though I was in management track, I used to do coding. I used to get involved in some interesting projects, hands-on, even then when I was heading Cloud Business Unit. So the passion actually takes away that risk fear factor to some extent. Okay, may not be completely, but to some extent. The next is planning really. If you want to do that thing, do something in parallel. Make sure that you gain the skills adequate enough so that you can switch. So some planning is required, and that's the action part, right? The planning itself is an action, and then do something about it, and then switch, right? So one more thing I find is that if you have a safety net when you take a risk, it doesn't work, honestly, because you're not into it. You always think of fallback, right? So, so if you have that passion, you gain that confidence, you prepare your skills for it, and just jump into it. And unless you do that, complacency strikes in, and if you can't be different than others, then you know what happens in our career. So you have to be little different. It doesn't necessarily mean changing the track completely, but just come out of what you are doing and think different or bigger, whichever, lateral or vertical. But you just have to get out of it and go there. So that's what I feel is really necessary, and otherwise we become replaceable in our industry in no time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very well said. I want to change tax a little bit and go into, from skills and abilities and actions to go inside our minds. And in the 2021 economy or the 21st century, the mind and developing it right is as big a play as developing other skills. So first, I want to turn to Lavina, and you've had when as soon as few years after you have launched this, COVID hit, and the whole economy gets disrupted. But particularly your business, which depends on people, trusting you to deliver a piece of clothing, which is coming from somewhere else in a shared economy, and they are using it at a time when contact was kind of considered a death, this right knell with COVID. So this was pretty tough time, I imagine, for you and your team. What kind of mental resilience you've talked about how you pivoted, how you repositioned, but what kind of mental resilience did it take for you all to survive and weather this storm and come out guns blazing on the other end of it? And how does one go about developing it? What are the techniques you use in practice to develop that resilience?
Sure. I'm going to start with a quote which I generally use for myself. So I would say above everything else I've done, I have always said I've had more guts than I've got talent. So I have always looked at myself in that area that let's see max what would happen. Let's see. Let's get into it. Now COVID was a very different case, and in general, I'm sure people who have started the journey alone would know how lonely the entrepreneurship journey is when you at least get started. So we have crossed that barrier. We've reached a place where by 2019 we really felt that okay, we are there. Our idea is a hit. Everything is at place now. We are profitable. Let's expand. Let's go. Berserk over it. Let's go to each city. Let's have multiple stores. Let's focus on online. A lot of ideas, plans were in place, and we were supposed to implement all that from April 2020. So we had done all that study, and then COVID happened. So March 2020 was when, and we remember each date. I'm sure most of the entrepreneurs in this area would remember the dates and the days when we opened, when we closed. So when COVID hit us, initially we felt it will eventually go. It first few months were still fine. We were focusing a lot on online, maybe enhancing our website, working more on the app part, designing things differently. So the team was also very motivated, and we were all working online and doing all that. But with time, post 3 months, when we started running low on cash, because that's very important. You have zero income. Suddenly, for 3 months, you had zero income, and then you definitely had contingency plan, but how long can you sustain that? So when you started seeing that going low, it does hit you differently, and I am no different. I was also equally troubled, thinking how can we manage this part, and how are we going to do. And the biggest worry was Pandurang, it was not that what will happen now. The worry was what will happen when we'll hit the ground. Will we be relevant, or are we going to be irrelevant? There were a lot of speculation happening by thought leaders, industry leaders. The more you read, the more scared we were, that what is going to happen next. So July, when we were given the opportunity to actually get started with our offline stores, I decided to be there at the storefront to understand that where are we, and if we have to get started again now, what steps needs to be taken. So again, action played a very important role here. So I was there at the store. We started talking to each individual that those, and call it maybe a luck or whatever. We did see people walking into the store, which was equally surprising for us as well. And when we asked them, we were curious to know that with all this lockdowns, no events happening, what made them come, and how did they decide to be here, how did they trust us with the hygiene factor and other things. So that the answers were, very common, at the same time very deep. They said all of us are trying to survive and do our best today. So we are sure that you as a company would also do your best to, deliver us, the best of the things. So we started doing double dry cleaning. We had to steam iron each outfit which was given to the client. So team had definitely extra work which was to be done. But like we said, we didn't worry much about what is happening. We were more worried what is going to happen in future. And by being there at the storefront, being there when we hit the ground, we realized, at least the first realization was, okay, we are not irrelevant. It's only postponed. The business is only postponed. It's not, dying, which was the most, it relieved us a lot. And we felt that now we have to start working in and around that how can we, maybe we can get the outfits sent to the people at home. We can send 3 outfits to them. They don't have to come if they're worried. So we came up with a lot of different ideas so that they are also comfortable. We are also doing business fine. In all this, what was important was to not getting mentally disturbed about the fact that we are in this situation. In a way, today when I look at it, and if I can call Rent and Attire my baby, we saw demonetization very early, right? We just started and demonetization hit us. So we made, again, we were opportunist enough. We made good money out of that as well, because everything white, we told people we are accepting cash. So we made more business out of that as well. Similarly, post-COVID, we started telling people how you're saving money, how if you go and buy an outfit which will cost you 2 lakhs, you're getting it rented for 20,000 itself. So you're saving so much of money. Instead, use that money for, betterment. Or now everybody is well aware of how important savings are, because anytime anything can happen. So that awareness and awareness about sustainability has added more to our business, and I'm very happy and glad to share this with everybody that we are doing better than what we were doing pre-COVID. So
Excellent,
somewhere,
excellent.
thank you.
So,
Somewhere
right.
that controlling the mind, and I'm a very strong believer of law of attraction. What we say happens to us. So we never, the entire team and us, every morning we used to say that we are going to do better than this. We are going to come back to normal, better than normal. And that really, the manifestation maybe helped or whatever. We are in a very good stage today.
Wow. Absolutely brilliant. I think for me, the takeaway was don't fight your demons in the head. Go out in the field, confront them head on, make things happen rather than sit and brood about what failure may look like. Brilliant. Jen, turning to your thoughts on this, you are a big believer in meditation, and which is now proven also through neuroscience to be very critical in developing a calm and resilient mind, right, to tackle the uncertainties and challenges that we face. So tell us a bit about your thoughts, practices, and your experiences, and on how to use that as a practice to build that mental resilience.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as you said, we do a lot of things for our body. We do exercise, we eat well, but we don't do anything for mind. So mind also needs good food, food as in thoughts, and some exercise, that is meditation. Okay. So that is pretty much necessary, but whenever we talk about it, maybe in our culture or everywhere, meditation is thought to be like 60s plus phenomenon. Why do you worry about it now? But it has to start as early as childhood, really, teenage. Okay, it's not easy to make a teenager sit and do meditation, but that's where it should start. And one interesting thing happened to me was I was on the board of studies for one of the institutes to design their syllabus. And I proposed to those guys that, we should formally introduce something in the college curriculum for meditation. So the entire staff was clueless. What am I talking about? And unfortunately, the institute was not also well connected with the industry and wasn't much aware of what's happening in industry. So my example to them was like, you know, we all who study in college, we are like Abhimanyus. Okay, you guys are training us and pushing in the Chakravyuh, but you're not giving us any skills to come out of it. So we need to give those skills to these Abhimanyus so that they can decide for themselves how to stay in or come out, whatever, right? And so to me, it's not only meditation is not only important for our individual stress management, you would call it, peace of mind, whatever. But I also find it really beneficial in my career with respect to, as simple as empathy. I'll just again talk about this product mindset thing, right? The product involves so many things, right? There is the engineering, there's marketing, there's CEO, there is tech support, there's pro serve. There are so many people involved. They have different duties. You have to have understanding or empathy towards these people, and really build something which makes sense for everybody. I keep telling my engineering teams always when I find some bugs, that do you want to be called at 2 a.m. in at midnight or 2 a.m. and be bothered about something is not working, and what would happen to a support guy when that happens? So this thought process also has to come in, and that comes only when you're this is not like this is not a corporate stuff where you are taught this through requirement or something like that. It's like your mind has to think about all these things, and again you have to step back, and your mind has to have that clarity, that patience, that empathy, And all this comes through when you start, inspecting inside, retrospecting inside yourself, and what it's as simple as what do you not like to happen to you, and same thing is true for everybody else. And so that's where it all starts. So meditation brings you that empathy, that balance, that patience, dealing with ambiguity, etc., which definitely is important with respect to the career aspects. And that is when, if again, plan and action, right? Unless you do something about it, it's not going to happen. And one more thing I find really misleading in our culture is that when you do hobbies, whatever, hobbies is not meditation. It's, to me, it's a misleading thing. Okay, meditation is not about running away from something, but facing it. So my take on this is like your hobbies or whatever you do uh, just gives you a break temporarily, takes your thoughts away from whatever is happening. That is important. You come out of some stressful situations or you relax a little bit, but that doesn't bring in a fundamental change in you. It's just gives you temporary exit to get into something else and stay busy. Meditation is something where you have to actually analyze and face that situation, face that stress, face that challenge, and figure out why is it bothering me. So you have to be aware towards that problem that you are facing than running away from it and taking vacation somewhere else. So proper meditation technique where you look inside and face those challenges from within your mind is the mind exercise that we need to do. So I follow Vipassana, but people can follow whatever they want as long as it helps. But Vipassana is something that has helped me in all these aspects. Yeah. So anybody else from the panel who has the question that Pandurang was referring to? You can take that question by the time Pandurang comes back in.
Sure. So, Jayant, are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
I think Pandurang will quickly join us once he's able to set up his
Yeah.
audio.
Okay.
So we have a couple of questions from the audience. And the first question is for you, Jayant. You spoke about product mindset. So many a times in the service industry, customers control everything. So how do we inculcate this product mindset in such an environment?
Yeah. So it's little tricky, but customer controls everything because precisely the reason that they don't think we can think about product. We have not shown them our abilities to think like a product. If I look at it from customer's point of view, if they have a team which thinks about all these things, they would definitely give us more control than doing a micromanagement. And the key to that is definitely that we need to build our teams, think beyond requirements. There are numerous ways of doing it. I don't think we can discuss all that in this call per se. We can have a separate chat on that. But once we start showing that we are thinking beyond the requirements that we are giving, customer will start pushing or exploring more with us and will start giving us more and more responsibilities, and we can rise up in the hierarchy there and go beyond the requirements. And this has happened to me even in some of my projects in the past in Persistent, that we have been able to convert customer from being a micromanager to really giving us more work and giving more ownership based work. So it's a journey where we have to show those things that we can think about this product not from the requirement point of view, but end customer and end user point of view. If we can show that to the customer, then slowly we will rise up. Customer will tell us, throw ambiguous requirement at us, and we just have to nail it down. And as we keep doing it more and more, they will give us control. I think it's all goes hand in hand. They are also trying to mitigate their risk, so they don't want to give us in services mindset. They don't want to give us something initially, but as we show that we are capable, they will start pushing more stuff to us.